All right, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday here. We're going to be talking about real estate and also automations in the AI world. I've got a couple guests on here today that are new and a return guest on Chris Iannotti in the Nashville area. Chris, thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back, Joel. Really enjoyed being here.
Damn right. All right. Kobe in the Houston market. Alex also in the Tennessee market, joining us on the lending side.
We're going to have a lending war on here. Two lenders in the same room. Kobe, we got to stick together, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
how we do it.
Yeah. So when we say AI automations, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, I think for me, obviously, I can just chime in and say that it's obvious that AI is the future. If it's right now, you know what I mean? And anyone that's not willing to learn and learn how to utilize this in their business is going to get left behind. I think that's a common term, is being left behind. My cousin today was just posted on social media that she has never even entered a prompt into ChatGPT before, and she doesn't want to. She's afraid of the robot takeover and all this kind of stuff. And I just explained, like, you need to get with it, or you're going to be left behind or lost.
Yeah, that's pretty unique. As far as like outside of the real estate industry, not a lot of people use AI on a day-to-day basis. I think we're all pretty familiar with it. When you say AI, I think the first word that comes to mind is probably ChatGPT. That's just the most commonly used. I think most people, that's what they think of when they hear the word AI as well, instead of all the other tools that are out there. But I understand it's not just ChatGPT. It's just that's the most commonly used tool. And still, there's people out there, like you mentioned, Chris, who aren't using it, which is it's almost like a shock to hear. But it's also, I understand that's not the case. That there's people out there who are afraid of it, which is we could maybe talk a little bit about that too.
I think that's the thing too. Even people who aren't using it are using it every day. They just don't realize, because the technology has such far reaches that anything that you have that's smart or intuitive has some sort of AI feature already baked into it.
Facts.
Yeah, like Google search has AI functions now. So if you do anything in Google with your search engine, like depending on what you're searching, like the first thing that pops up is an AI summary instead of just the first links like it used to. So if you're using Google, you're pretty much using AI at this point.
Facial recognition, traffic predictions. Even your smart oven's probably got an AI feature in there.
Even Facebook now, if you look, when there's a post, MetaQuest has AI generated summary of what the post and what the commenters are saying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't even need to read all the comments anymore.
With the diverse backgrounds that we have here, I've been in lending since 2006, and I've gone through different, ups and downs and the 2009 crash and having to reinvent myself multiple times. And I have kind of a vision of where I want to take my business, where I think this is going to be, where I'm going to be able to stand out in the crowd amongst 1,000 or maybe 1 million lenders out there. From what I'm seeing from a data standpoint, we're almost at like an all-time low of the number of transactions in the marketplace, going back to like the mid 90s, I think. So what is the biggest problem that your team or agents or your business is seeing right now? Obviously transactions, but what's the biggest problem right now that you see, either for the client or the team?
Yeah, so I think the biggest issues we're seeing across different markets is just there's clients out there who are very uncertain about what's going to happen. So they're not 100% sure whether or not they want to pull the trigger if it's not something they absolutely have to. And some people are even thinking about potentially, renting for a little bit before making a decision, just because they don't know what's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. So people are kind of in a position where there may be a little bit of fear. They don't really know what's going to happen with the interest rates, what's going to happen with the real estate prices as well. So unless somebody who is in a position where they absolutely have to buy from the buyer side, then they might be even thinking, even if they have to move, thinking of maybe renting for a little bit just to see what the market is doing. So that's the biggest hurdle that we've seen, not just here locally, but from agents that I work with in a couple different states as well.
In my market here, what I'm noticing is on the selling side, they have good rates. There's no pressure unless, just like Kobe said, they have to move, like they're being relocated for a job or something like that. They don't see the benefit of selling a property, even though they might have a bunch of equity in it, and getting a new loan with a much higher rate. They also believe that their property is worth a lot more than what it is. They think that we're still in a market when there was lower rates and people are, getting in multiple offer situations. The buying side has completely slowed down, and I do believe that's due to rates. And so any valuations that I'm coming up with for potential sellers, one in particular wants $1.2 million for their house that ideally would need to be completely demolished, knocked down, and it's in a great neighborhood. Green Hills is one of the most affluential neighborhoods in Nashville, and we could show comps for $2 to $3 million builds all around them, but to fit that 1.2 million price tag they want, we'd have to build a $6 million house, which would price us out of the market. So just a little bit of unrealistic expectations from sellers as far as the value of their properties go.
Yeah, I think both of those that you guys just mentioned kind of created a perfect storm. So we have all this uncertainty in the market right now with rates, the administration, the political news around the world, and then we're coming off of one of the hottest artificially made markets that we've had in recent time. So nobody's really happy.
It's facts. You got quite a few people chiming in over here. What's up, everybody?
Yeah, we got Mojo, who's in Florida. How you doing, Mojo? Rishi, thank you for stopping by. Mackenzie, looks like maybe one from one of your channels. Yeah, I mean, rates are high, prices are high. People are waiting, right? People are waiting for either prices to come down or rates to come down, or maybe the market to change, or whatever they're waiting for. What do you think is one of the biggest, missing pieces that you've seen somebody, either be aware of or fall into place that's helped somebody get off of the fence, whether it's buying or selling, whatever it is that they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, what are you guys seeing from the lending side? Are you guys see anything that's when you're talking to buyers? Are there any particular objections you guys are running into? I don't know if Alex or Joel, you guys can talk about that.
Well, definitely, running into the same objections about interest rate and price and things like that. But I think a little bit of incentives are getting people off the fence. I noticed that in Nashville, things are sitting around longer. So there are some new builds that are going up where I'm working with a builder and we're able to offer a rate of 4.9%. So that's something flashy that we can kind of, show people that they're not going to be saddled with this 6.5%, 7% rate in this time of uncertainty. That seller concessions, little things that we can offer to kind of sweeten the deal, because I feel like these people that are waiting have been waiting and they just need a reason to get off the fence.
What about you, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that's coming through my desk is sets of people who have to do something, whether it's a divorce or downsizing or changing the family or various, kids or twins coming, things like that. And so you have to do something. And I think one of the biggest questions I'm seeing a lot of for people who already own a home is, do I keep the current one or do I sell it? Yeah. And, there's no right or wrong answer, but if someone's got a 2.5% interest rate on a mortgage they got a couple of years back, I mean, giving up that rate is very, very painful. But then some people just don't ever want to deal with a renter, don't want to deal with the headache, the BS of it. And that's here nor there. I mean, obviously you can hire a property manager, and if you cash flow enough, you can maybe afford it. But I think that's one of the questions that's coming up a lot. And then on top of that, if you do want to keep that property as a rental, how do I get into the new property in terms of the funds needed? I have some people that did HELOCs in the past. Now that line of credit's there, and the access is there to be able to use for down payment on the new property. But a lot of it, is people that just have to do something. And from a rate standpoint, I'm so tired of hearing about, well, back in the 80s, rates were 12% or 13%. The difference is that the ratio of home price to average median income, I think it was like 4 to 1 in terms of the price to income. And now it's like 8 or 9 to 1. Like the value of homes as a ratio to earned income is way higher as inflation. And I think $5-6 trillion have been printed since COVID. So, inflation was bound to happen. No way around that. So what do you do to get into the next property, in terms of having the cash without having sold the property? And, there's different strategies for that. But that's some of the things that I'm seeing. It's just really people that have to go do something are the ones that are doing and being active in the market.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely am focusing on my investors that are not so concerned about rates and things, that are looking for flips or looking for properties to add to their portfolio, whether it's, short-term, mid-term rentals, co-living. There's a huge community out there that's still buying, and that's who I'm trying to focus on right now.
Yeah, I think that's good, because investors, they're buying properties all the time. They're just looking for a good deal, and I think they're a little bit more level-headed when it comes to making decisions as well. I think for a lot of people, what I'm hearing is they're comparing the current the current market situation to maybe a couple years back, or just maybe they had a friend who bought a house, back in 21, and they're just comparing that situation to the current situation. And they're not seeing it from a more of a kind of a objective point of view, that this is a completely different market than it was 4 years ago. Right. And really, if you're talking to buyers, I think the most effective buyers agents out there, they're the ones who can get them to see that, if we can get you a deal that works for you, then it doesn't really matter what else is going on, what your friend did a couple years ago. It's just what works for you at the moment. Right. And how do we make, what's happening right now in the market, so that you can get into a home that you can afford and you're also satisfied with. But working with investors, they're not, there's different things that they can do there. So.
They're definitely a challenge. They bring their own baggage for sure. God love them.
And it's funny that people remember the 3% rate, but they don't remember the 30 offers that were on every house, and the 10% you had to put cash over asking just to even be in the conversation, waiving all contingencies, and all of the chaos and turmoil that came with those 3% rates.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people were lining up, right, with their agents in front of open houses and doing showings. Like, they're just lining up.
Even 3% rates wasn't a good time. Let's have something reasonable, like 4 or 5%. We can live with that.
I agree.
All right, real quick, I've got a couple YouTube channels linked in the main heading description of this live. So if you get out of this and come back, you can check out their YouTube channels. Alex, I don't have yours, but I have Kobe's and I have Chris's YouTube channel. So check it out, give them a subscribe, and we'll drop Mojo's. I know I have his somewhere in the links here. So in my world, right? I mean, kind of going back to the AI, there's a lot of solutions for certain, hurdles that people may be overcoming as they're navigating the landscape of, either acquiring or selling or whatever their situation may be. And so, okay, what can I use? What tools can I use from an AI standpoint to be able to get in front of more people to let them know that there are solutions? And so some of the things, you have ChatGPT, and you got video content and cutting things up like in Opus Clips and captions. And I use CapCut for a lot of my video editing. And, as a growing platform, I don't have 100,000 followers. I don't even have 10,000 followers. I mean, I've got, a following that's growing. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is that I'll post stuff. And then I'll run into somebody and it's like, hey man, I've been following your stuff. It's all over my feed, especially on Facebook, all over my feed. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, man, that's great that you're seeing it, but you haven't commented, you haven't liked, you haven't done anything, but I appreciate you looking on your phone and what's great. But my goal, my vision for what I'm trying to build with my platforms, from specifically the lending side of things, is just letting people know that there are solutions. And that if they have something that's complex, I'm trying to be known as the person that gets the complex deals done, whether it's a DSCR loan or an investor loan or down payment assistance at 580 credit score, or a renovation loan at FHA 203K at a 580 credit score, various things like that. So that way, when I'm talking to a realtor in DC or Florida, Virginia, they know me for one thing. It's something very, very specific as they're analyzing, a whole slew of other options out there. So part of what I'm using AI for is just to be able to get more content out there and just stay relevant, right? So for you guys, what are some of the things, the uses that you're able to use these technologies and to accomplish what?
My most recent use of AI that was pretty awesome was to create a video for us. Me and one of my partners, Jonna, she'll have to come on here sometime as well. I just put into ChatGPT or Grok. I use Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Alex actually taught me how to use them to play against each other, right? So put a prompt into ChatGPT and then take that into Gemini and ask them to improve on it, which is a really cool thought. And so what it did was it created uh, a scheme, kind of what the video should be about. I just gave a brief description of myself and Jonna, our demographic that we wanted to attract, and man, it generated everything from the total script, start to finish, what the settings should be, and we toyed with it a little bit, but we used that. We spent under $1,000 and made a video, and it took us maybe an hour and a half of filming, and man, we had a really cool video that we put out and shared all over social media. I think we got like almost 10,000 views within the first 2 days. So I mean, that was really helpful. It's a lot better than the generation of, interaction I got in the past doing it myself. So that's just one way that I used AI.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's tough because there's so many different ways to use it. There's so many different LLMs, there's so many different narrow AIs and programs that you can use. So I think a good way to go about it is, have one of the LLMs that you use all the time that's starting to learn how you interact with it. Let it know the problem that you have, the issue that you're trying to solve. Let it know possible roadblocks that you could run into or advantages that you have. And then let the AI work on a plan based on those constraints and tell it to use the programs that you already have, because a lot of times we're not optimizing the programs that we could. So it's possible that these AIs could teach us how to use something that we're already familiar with and how to start shaving off seconds. So you can save off minutes, so you can take off hours, take off days, and kind of work up from it that way. Because if you just try to automate everything right off the bat, it's easy to get lost in the shuffle.
Tell everyone what an LLM is, Alex.
Yeah, an LLM is a large language model. So that's any of the Geminis, Claude, ChatGPT that we use every day. They're optimized constantly by everybody that's using the programs based off of natural language. So that's the real key with AI. That's what's allowing it to grow so fast and to be so reachable to everyone, is that these AI models that back in the day had to be done binary off zeros and ones can now be done off natural language and can learn and grow that way.
See, guys, I told you. he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Now for AI, I think what I've been using a lot of is just for the content side of things. So Opus Clip, using it, taking a full length podcast and then chopping it into 7 clips so that I can share something at least once a day. And also just I use ChatGPT a lot for just writing in general, newsletters to entire blog posts of up to 3,000 words. They're completely SEO optimized for certain keywords as well. And you have to run it through different, I would say, like custom GPTs that you would give it custom instructions and knowledge as far as what you want it to do. But if you do it did cut down our writing time for a 3,000 word article from about 4 hours to less than 2 hours, about an hour and a half. So it does save a ton of time as far as content generation. But I mean, have any of you guys played around with the deep research tool? That's been a new thing that I've kind of tested it a little bit.
Yeah, I use that to look up some properties for a realtor that I'm working with. He's trying to build a used car lot, and in Nashville, Tennessee, you need to have a lot that can hold at least 14 spaces, and he wants to make it a mixed use for a small business association loan. So I use the deep research function to told it the restrictions of the property that we're looking at, told it the general areas, and had the deep research find all the properties that were eligible for that in the area. I've also used it. I was marketing to HR companies, so I can go in at their lunch, tell them a little bit about these non-conventional or these non-QM loan products and other things that I think could get them into a house. So I used the deep research button to find all the companies in my area that fit that criteria that I could contact to and go present it. It's just, I think when they have something that's complex or you want to make sure you find all the answers, I think the deep research is great. And then also, to look at how the AIs are thinking and look at what their reasoning is. And I even use most of my prompts. I say, let me know why you're coming up with this as your answer, and if there's anything better, like justify the information that you're giving me. So you're not just taking it as law, whatever this AI is saying to you, because it does try to go along with what you're prompting it in the first place. So if you ask it for its reasoning, it really lets you dissect if this is the best information for you.
When you say deep research, how is that different than just regular search or regular prompts and then the actual surface area of the display of information? Can you walk us through what that means versus just the regular stuff?
Yeah, so my experience when I'm using just the regular chat feature, the regular AI, some of the responses can start to kind of sound similar and not give you the full reasoning behind it. And I find when I use the deep research, it's something that's more complex, has multiple pieces to it, or you really want to make sure you find everything. And then also for things like that, it's good to just ask the LLM that you're using, say, what is the deep research function and what's the best way to optimize it? I find like just having a conversation with it and having it try to tell you why it's the best and what it's working on is a great way to start and gives you ways to kind of pick it apart.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think it's more like an agent, right? It goes out there and does the research for you. Technically, like it's all public data. It's not going to be able to pull any proprietary information that you wouldn't be able to find yourself, but it would take you like multiple hours and days to get that information if you didn't use the deep research tool to go out there and actually do the research and then compile it into the format that you want it to, and then give you a report back. So I've actually seen people use it where they'll ask the deep research like a prompt where they're in the mindset of their client, and then it'll generate an entire report that they can then use as a lead magnet to share to their clients as well.
I was talking to Alex about this the other day. I was saying sometimes it all starts with where do I start? Where do I begin as far as doing any kind of search, right? We're so used to using Google for everything, right? Like, and you have to word your prompt so perfectly or you're going to get some crazy off the wall information. And I've noticed that with AI, it's been just like having a conversation with one of your friends, you know what I mean? As far as how you're verbalizing your prompt, how you're putting that into words.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier than like a Google search would be in the past.
More conversational, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. I see our boy Mark is in the chat. Bear down, buddy. I don't know why I couldn't spit his name out. I think that's funny. He's always giving Joel a hard time. I love it. I'm here for it.
I just can't wait till I get to Vegas next February for the One Round a Lot of Time conference. And we're going to go hit a batting cage or a mound and on a baseball field. I'm going to strike his ass out. I'll probably do it with both arms, right-handed and left-handed.
Wow.
Okay.
Hey, Mark. You can book it. Left-handed, bro. Left-handed.
That's funny. That's good stuff.
So lead management, that's something that I haven't cracked the code on that with AI. Anybody have any experience on, lead management, AI systems, technology?
Well, I've used it for lead management, and I find when you're trying to use the AI for that, it's easy to get ahead of yourself and try to build this system that's going to manage 500 or 1,000 people, and you can spend all this time working on it. And then once you're actually getting up to that amount of people that you want the system to work for, it turns out it's not the best way. So I would just try to use it to shave off seconds and just to be cautious and just to try to build something out of necessity as you're working on it, and try to make sure that you're optimizing the programs and the systems that you already have that you're using. And if you aren't using anything, be like, okay, well, what's the next step to improve that? Because if you go from writing everything on a notebook to creating a fully automated tagged lead flow drip campaign in a system that you're not familiar with, you can kind of get lost in that as well.
So you're saying start with the basics, create a basic spreadsheet or something to put all your leads in, and then just kind of take that from there and see what you can do with it. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Or if you have something that you're already using or a CRM or something that you're that you're doing most of it through, but figure out what your holes are. So if it's your lead follow-up, are you having trouble finding the content to say to them? Are you having trouble remembering when to follow up, and see what things are holding you back? And then have a conversation with your chat GPT about it and say, hey, this is where I'm weak. This is what's falling through the cracks. What ways do you see to optimize this or to get past that?
That's a good point. Yeah, for me, I do a lot of manual lead management. I've used it to, like, when somebody asks me something for prospecting and I don't necessarily know how to respond immediately, I'll put that message in a chat GPT. It already has the history of like what I want to do, my goals are, and then I'll have it generate like a response. And then what I want to continue that conversation down the line. So, and I don't necessarily copy and paste it and just send the message right back, or, do a voice message right back. I just kind of use it as a lines of, okay, so this is kind of ideation almost, like to tell me, okay, so this is kind of on the lines of what I should be saying, the sentient, and so on and so forth. But I use it more in a manual way. I have not gotten to the systemization part of AI yet.
Well, I think that's a great place to be with it. And that's how I use it all the time too. I'll even just respond to the message inside a chat. I copy the message and have it on my phone as well. So copy the text, put that into the chat on your phone and say, respond to this, and then do it like a rough draft, like you're just talking to the client. And then at the end, I'll say, but I also want it to sound nice. I want to remember to schedule a follow-up and, make it lighthearted or something like that. So you write it like you think you want to as a first draft. Make sure you have the context right and the other little bits that you want to add, and then let the AI come up with it. That way it's already structured kind of in your voice, and you make sure to hit all the points, and it's just fine-tuning what you already put in there.
And I don't use this, but I know some people who do like note takers, like automatic note takers. A lot of people use them to record their Zoom meetings and stuff, and then it auto-populate their CRM, I'm sure, or at least they can copy and paste the notes and put it in their CRM for that.
Yeah, those are great. And I think anything that you can do, even if it's not fully automated, as long as you're still the point person with the AI, you're still saving a ton of time. And then once you get to the point where, because like you can schedule emails in your Outlook or your Gmail, and you can have your email signatures with full emails already saved in there. So anything you're doing is just taking a few seconds. But I think when you get to the point where you have so many of those individual follow-up things to do for 300 clients that a few seconds each is taking you hours, then it's time to look into the back-end automations and the other things like that you can do with the AI that are going to take maybe a little bit of money, maybe a little bit of time, but it's going to save you from sending hundreds of emails. But if you try to do that initially and try to set it up for 4 emails, you're going to spend a lot of time setting up a system that might not be the best case scenario for it.
Talking about this makes me realize there's a lot that I still need to do to set up my business, as far as communicating with my clients, dude. Like I take it case by case basis and just kind of run and gun, which works for right now. But I know if I want to scale my business, I need to get organized and do stuff like this. And it's kind of intimidating sometimes.
It definitely is. I think it's just important to just break it off, piece by piece, and say what's the biggest headache that I'm dealing with today, and how can I make it a little bit better?
Yeah,
I like that. Make it a little bit better. Yeah, you don't have to, swat home runs every at bat. Singles and doubles, walks, they matter. They add up. And thinking about something specific, right? Okay, CRM. We use a couple different CRMs with my company. And it's, my biggest thing, especially our operating system, which is Encompass. Encompass is so slow. It's painful. and that's a whole different kind of rabbit hole. But then our CRM, it's okay, but it's slow. You want to be able to do, I just want to be able to move. I remember when I started in mortgage in 2006, we used a DOS based system. It was like black and green and like tab. There was no cursor. It was just tab. Shift, tab, to go backwards. I miss those days because it's just so fast. But the idea of doing like a SMS text blast to a group, a subset of say investors or first-time home buyers or agents, and so for you guys, I guess I'll go to Kobe on this. If you got an email from a lender or an insurer or whatever partner that's bi-weekly with updates or products or whatever the subject may be, or an email or a text, what are your thoughts on receiving kind of a SMS text from like a generalized number that it's from, say, Joel Farrow, but it's not my personal cell? It's automated. What are your thoughts about receiving that periodically?
Yeah, so I get a lot of these messages, probably not from as many lenders as just a lot of messages because you're, as a real estate agent, your information is public. But I get a lot more emails than I do SMS text messages. So as far as getting text messages, I'll have to see like what is the content in those messages, right? Is it just kind of like an update, or what's being said in those messages, and what's the value being provided to either the agent or the investor that you guys are targeting?
So if it's relevant, if it catches your eye, maybe it sticks home. But I mean, I know I get all kinds of BS texts as well, and it goes into the junk, and you don't think about it unless it's relevant. So what about your teams that are going to be doing some kind of SMS text to clients or leads? Any type of feedback on that?
Yeah, so the shorter the message, the better. The shorter the message, the easier it is to get your point across without a bunch of fluff. Because usually when people look at their messages, if it's too long, they just won't look at it and they'll just move on. Right? They might open it, but they won't read it. But if it's a shorter message, they'll at least take the time to read it because it's easier to read. So it might be relevant, it might not be, but it's something that's like, okay, so if it's something that's interesting, it might lead them to a different page, like with a link. Or something that gets them a little bit more information, but the initial message has to be a little bit shorter because we don't necessarily want to take the time when we're all busy kind of out there, whether if you're a client or you're being marketed to by a vendor, to read a super long text in the middle of your day just to kind of get the point across. So I think it's just shorter the better, and just being consistent as well, because if you show up over and over again, it might not be today, it might not be next week, but it could be 6 months or even a year or so down the line, or multiple years down the line. But if you're showing up consistently, then people are going to notice that. And it's almost like a subconscious thing that they remember, oh, I've seen this person before, right? I've seen this person is always consistent. So, when they do need to use your services or interested in what it is that you're promoting, then they're actually going to lean more towards you because of simply just the exposure effect that you've exposed yourself and your message over and over again. There's power in that people may or may not realize.
So the top agents that are, in the different markets that your team operates, is there one thing that's a commonality across these groups of teams that are successful, whether it be lead follow-up or systems or AI?
Yes, it's kind of going back to what I said. It's consistency. It's people who are it doesn't matter if they're doing doesn't matter what type of marketing they're doing, how they're following up, how they're utilizing AI in their business, but they're doing whatever tasks that they've set for themselves consistently, right? They're prospecting clients, at least certain hours of the day, right? They set aside time for that, and they're continuing to do that. And the same thing when it comes to follow-up, right? They're setting away time to consistently follow up with people over and over again. And some of the top agents are, that I work with, they're getting leads. Some of them are getting leads just 100% from referrals. And some people are getting them from a completely different method where they're actually prospecting, right? And there's not a lot of, former client referrals, and they're generating leads almost cold from their market. But whatever it is they're doing, and it doesn't necessarily mean they have a system, right? So some of the agents that I work with, they're not really great with technology. Actually, they're not really, plugged in. They don't have like a automated follow-up system that's super advanced. Maybe they have a newsletter going out, but they're really consistent when it comes to their actions, and they're either if it's prospecting and follow-up, those are going to be the two. So are you getting in front of the people that you want to talk to, and how consistently are you doing that? Is I think the most important point. So some people are able to do that on a one-on-one basis. Some people are much more comfortable doing it on a more automated basis, reaching more people over time.
Love that. I want to give a quick shout out to Marco Shiro in Hawaii. I dropped his YouTube channel in the links. He's at like 857 subscribers. He's a investor in Pittsburgh, so like 5,000 miles away. Mojo Mindset. He's active duty, owns real estate, short-term rentals. Dropped his channel down below as well. And Chris, yours is in there. Kobe, yours is in there. So check out their channels. Subscribe. Do it right now before you forget. So, Chris, you're a return guest on here a number of times, and kind of the sub-2 background, seller financing, seller carry, creative deal structure. What's one of the things that you would say the average agent needs to know about that world that can help them close one more deal a quarter?
I think first and foremost, just know that it's not illegal. That's the one comment I get a lot. So some of my prospecting is done by calling stale listings and just asking the agent, hey, would your client be in a position to where they could entertain a creative offer? If they have to move because of a job or regardless of the situation, if they don't need to sell that house in order to buy another one, we could probably do something together, And I think they just need to know that it is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, like there is language about taking over somebody's loan and not necessarily going through the typical assumption process. That will prove to you that it's not illegal. It is untraditional, but times like now you need to think outside the box, and I think it's just another, I heard Mark say it on your conversation the other day, it's just another tool to have in your toolbox, just like wholesaling, just like flipping a property, just like lease options, seller finance, these are all different tools that agents should have in their toolbox. If the goal is to help your client, whether it's the buyer or the seller, then you should be well versed in all these topics and know how to operate. And if you don't, just admit that and ask for help. We can get you on the phone with another pro. We can get you on the phone with a lawyer, a real estate attorney. We can get you on the phone with a title company that does these deals. But just saying like, no, they're not interested because you don't understand what it is and are too embarrassed to admit it. I think that's doing everybody a huge disservice, the agent included.
Yeah. Because then you got sellers that just won't budge on a price, and they're just waiting for something to change.
And for a sub-2 buyer, the price isn't really the issue. The bigger concern is what is the rate that you currently have on your loan? What's your PITI? What can I do as far as rental options in that area? Are there restrictions on short terms? Can I do midterm rental? Can I do co-living? Like, what's my max benefit as far as cash flow in the property as an investment, income producing property rather than just a traditional, sell and purchase deal? Lots of options out there, man, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what's one thing in your world, well, in our world, that you've dug into, come across that most people don't know about but need to be aware about?
Oh man, it's tough to know where to start. Just like you said, you're trying to, people have all of these beliefs that they built up in their head or these restrictions that they put on themselves. They always have not always, but people have they want something to be perfect. They want to get the best deal. They want to wait to have 20%. They want to wait to fix their credit up. They want to wait for prices to go down another 10 grand or below 6%, something like that. But what they don't know is those typically aren't even the right answers. You don't need to put 20% down. You don't need to have perfect credit. And by waiting another year or two to have these imaginary things cleared up, you could be putting yourself in a much worse overall position.
Yeah. Chris, Alex, in your market, I'm going to put you on the spot. Maybe you know the answer, maybe you don't. We could probably grok it in a few seconds, but the amount of residential construction the last few years versus multifamily and apartment complexes, what's your market looking like in terms of just ground up construction?
That's wild. Yeah, I'd probably would have to grok that, but I know that it's definitely huge. There's people, like I said before, that are building strictly for rentals, building houses to rent out. Multifamilies, you see apartment complexes going up everywhere. Single family development is really, I don't know, correct me if you think I'm wrong, Alex, but mostly closer to Nashville, closer around the city, the outskirts, the surrounding areas, the surrounding counties, you see a lot more multifamily. So I could do some research into that, but I think it's mostly single family development closer to the city and more multifamily development in the surrounding areas.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a weird dichotomy that we're seeing because there are a lot of townhouses and multifamilies going up. That being said, there were also a bunch of those going up during COVID, and now the rental, the demand for those has gone down. Like I said, I'm working with the builder on these townhouse build, and the builder's giving away 20 grand in incentives just to get them sold because there's such influx of these townhouses that are around. And I'm sure they're going to be rented because people are still moving to this part of the country. But I was talking to my buddy who's a property manager, and he said if someone wants to buy something in Nashville or the outlying areas as an investment, he recommends a single family home because lack of occupancy is a number one killer when you're talking about an investment deal. And townhouses and other things are sitting for a little bit longer now.
You don't see any. I get deals sent to me every day from a whole list, a database of wholesalers that send me deals. And I've seen maybe one condo in the last 6 months that was for sale or that somebody's trying to offload. They built all these huge, tall sky rises full of apartments, and they're offering free parking spaces that would normally fetch them $250, $300 a month, 3 months free rent. Like these buildings are sitting empty. And it's because they're trying to charge $3,500, $4,000 a month for rent, and they're nothing special. The ones that I've seen, 1 and 2 bedrooms, they kind of missed the mark.
There was that opportunity during COVID. A lot of people wanted those, and rents were going through the roof. And now people are looking back and they're wanting to get those numbers, but it just doesn't exist anymore.
Part of the reason that I asked that question is, kind of going back to, I have lending as my day job. I've got a podcast called Strive for 25, the number 25. And people may ask the question, well, the 25, does that mean you have to be 25 years old, whatever? But no, it's all about, hey, if you can increase income, work to save 25% of your income, then you're going to have options to invest in. I built my real estate portfolio kind of one primary residence at a time. And I bought one and then saved up, bought the next one, turned the old one into rental, rinse and repeat, and kind of did that as I scaled. And then I think about somebody who's 25 years old. Let's say you're making decent money and you look at your friends who are all renting. It's like, well, if you can somehow, some way save some money, put a down payment, buy a house, kind of back to you, Chris, your what's working in your market, the rent by the room, the house hacking, mantra. I mean, cover the majority of your payment, rinse and repeat. I mean, I feel like that's something that's still an opportunity for somebody. But, I talk to a lot of 25-year-olds that are out there in that range, and it's not even on their mindset. They have just other things, other goals that they may want to, whether it be socially or friends, or don't want to take the risk. And I get all that. But, the people that want to get ahead, the people that want to retire early, zigging while everyone's zagging. This is for Kobe. In the different markets that your teams are in, that buyer a property, live in it for a year or two, save up by the next one, turn the old one to rental. Is there a market that stands out where that type of philosophy could work?
Not like a specific market doesn't necessarily come to mind. I feel like there's that strategy works if you are in most markets and you do your numbers correctly and you get into the right property. I've seen this work with multiple different people. So like there's people who are in, different markets here in Texas and Austin who's done that, who are agents that specialize in doing that. And there's even, Curtis up in Washington, right? Completely different market. And it's working for him really well too. So it's something that's not necessarily, I guess, that I've seen as market specific between all the agents that I work with. It works in most markets if you get your numbers correct. And that's the most important thing for an investor too. But I think, if you're in a super expensive market, it probably works, a little better because because you'll be renting at a very, very high rate anyways. So why, if you're making good money, that's not something that you want to, you might be able to reduce your cost of living without having to necessarily sacrifice a ton of like your living, your quality of living, if you will, because a place like New York, I'm sure the rents are, very high for something that's not great to live in.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
I see a lot of people that are looking in specific markets, right? Like Nashville's a hot one, but I feel like Nashville, Davidson County specifically, has been so inflated that people like myself, I don't even bother. I really look in the outside surrounding counties for deals. I know Houston is one hot market. Phoenix seems like it's another hot market. People are also looking in Florida all the time. Florida, the one thing is the insurance. I think it was just on the news the other day that Allstate is another insurance company now that is raising rates substantially. Other insurance companies have moved out of Florida completely just because of the hurricanes and things like that. So I think a lot of it has to do with the increase of being able to spread the information about all these different strategies, right? Like flipping right now isn't really a great strategy because materials and the cost of labor is so high, right? And again, it goes back to sellers being kind of lofty with their ideas of what their property is worth, makes flipping kind of difficult right now. So everyone is changing, whether they're watching Bigger Pockets or whatever local pro they watch on social media. There's different strategies that are constantly evolving and changing. We started doing co-living last year, and all of a sudden this pad split is becoming more and more popular. And Pad Split, the CEO, came to Nashville and held this meeting, and everybody I know was calling me like, "Hey, you got to come to this meeting." And this guy from Pad Split, I'm like, "Dude, we've been doing Pad Split for the last 8 months already."
Mm-hmm.
The way they do things is a little different, but it's great. But they're based out of Atlanta, so that now they're starting to grow into other markets. So it's just a matter of like an increase in knowledge, spreading the word that there's other options, other opportunities, and just constantly evolving and growing.
All right, I want to give a shout out to Dylan Pettyjohn. House hacking at age 25. Got a second one at age 26, and multi-family, 3-plex, and then a 12-plex. So he's doing things. And
Heck
then PE turned RE. Curtis up in Washington. He's got a question. How do you send creative offers? Do you write up an LOI with 3 different options?
With creative offers, typically you can use an LOI, even though that's typically reserved for commercial purchases, right? You can use an LOI. I always pay the money and have a creative transaction coordinator involved I've got a copy of the correct contract, all the amendments, all the addendums and documents that you need to do it the right way without raising any red flags or any acceleration clauses and things like that. It's definitely worth the investment. That creative transaction coordinator will serve both parties, the buyer and the seller involved, get everybody on the same page collectively. If there's an agent involved, get the agent in the conversation to make sure that the agents are getting paid. And but yeah, you could start with an LOI just to start the conversation. I usually start with just a verbal conversation, start laying out terms, seeing if they're agreeable to those terms, and then put it on paper like an LOI and a purchase and sale contract. And then you send the addendums and the additional documents and get the TC. If they actually sign the contract and they're good to go, we just put it in special steps or just have those addendums included.
So pitfalls and fears. So this is for Chris, but quick side note. So Curtis, he's afraid of birds. We found this out on one of Mark's lives last week, like deathly afraid of birds. He's fearful. So speaking of fear, what types of things should you avoid on a creative deal structure or negotiations, Chris?
Anything that's a short balloon, like some sellers will ask for a 2-year balloon, a 3-year balloon. It's really hard for you as a buyer, as an investor, to get any real kind of return or to make any real dent in the equity or the balance of the loan in such a short period of time. So like usually when we buy a sub-2 deal, we're looking at like a 5-year exit. So we'll rack up whatever equity we can in 5 years and then sell the property, get the balance, the equity that was owed at the beginning of the sale to the seller, and the remaining equity would go in our pocket. So short balloon terms, anything where the numbers like, most rental properties as an investor, you're looking for that 1% rule where your rent should equal about 1% of the value of the property. With sub-2s, I look for something. It's got to be at least $1,000 a month cash flow for it to make sense for us, and that includes utilities, maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So making sure that your numbers make sense, do your due diligence, make sure you're getting good rental numbers, like Rentometer, I think, is one that we've used in the past. AirDNA, some of these apps that you can use are just like Zillow or Redfin or anything else. Sometimes the information that you get is inaccurate or just out of date. So like really do your homework and figure out what you can get for rent, and you can only do that by talking to locals. So whether it's getting on a Facebook chat group or talking to somebody that that lives in the area and finding out, what are people paying for rent around here? What about this neighborhood specifically? Because we know, just like living in St. Louis, from one street to the next, man, is a whole different world. You can get $1,000 a month on one block, then the next block over, they're getting, $2,200 a month for rent. So it's really important to do your homework and do your due diligence for sure.
All right, this is a question for Kobe. So, I've been on the lending side for a long time. You're on the agent side of things. What is the number one thing in this market right now that agents need to know to be successful?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it goes back to what Chris was talking about a little bit earlier. There's a lot of agents out there who don't understand creative financing. I'm not saying that they absolutely need to understand creative financing at the moment, but they need to understand that there's these options that are out there and they are legal, right? And a lot of agents, they either, whether it's just an ego thing, they don't want to admit they don't understand, or if it's just they're afraid because they don't want to get in trouble. Because, a lot of agents who are not investors, they hold a real estate license and they've been, they've gone through the courses and the C's and everything. It tells them, what you can't do, what you can't do. They never tell you what you can do. It's always the education on like, these are all the things that you can never do as a real estate agent. So they're kind of been, I guess, indoctrinated with that, that fear almost of there's only one way to do things. But in this market, if you really want to get deals done, if you really want to, actually service your clients and, have some movement in the market, then you have to admit to yourself, okay, there's going to be some options out there that I may not know. I'm either going to learn these options from the correct information, the correct sources, or I'm going to admit that I don't understand and partner up with somebody that does understand, or work with somebody that can help me understand this and move it forward as well. So I think that's the most important thing right now, is that there's a lot of, kind of on the topic of creative financing, is most agents who just do deals, they don't understand the options out there. And at this point, they should be more open-minded, I would say, to entertain these options, whether if it's for them, their own knowledge, or working with somebody that can actually help them.
So speaking of Houston, anything specific that you want to share about market trends, new construction, just what's going on in the Houston market right now that people should know about?
A lot of people are moving in, and we're really there's a lot of build out because Houston's pretty large. So there's a lot of new construction going up. I haven't seen, just from an eye test, I haven't seen a lot of multifamily new construction, like large multifamilies. A lot of new construction, either townhome communities or single family home communities. A lot of that going on in the outskirts of Houston. So like southwest Houston, there's a lot going on. Kind of where I'm at, there's a lot going on up north as well. Kind of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Houston, like the Cypress area.
Woodlands?
Yeah, the Woodlands. Yeah, there's a lot of new construction going up in those areas too. So yeah, people are moving here. So
Austin has been pretty popular too, hasn't it?
Austin?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Austin's probably the most popular. They were, from what I've heard from agents that are in Austin, there was such a huge influx of people going into Austin like 2020, 21. And then some of the prices were so inflated at that point. Now it's dropped because it was so inflated back in 21 that it's just by nature it's dropped now. But Austin's still very popular because anybody moving from California, they prefer the Austin culture than the rest of Texas.
We could have a whole nother podcast about that. Talk about that for days. We have the same thing going on here. Just to touch on it real briefly, where a majority of the state of Tennessee, just like Illinois, where I'm from, Chicago and Illinois is really the only Democratic concentration, and it affects the entire state, where the rest of the state is pretty rural and pretty conservative. Same thing in Tennessee. Like, most of the state is pretty conservative, but Nashville, because of all the people moving from California, it's turned pretty blue. And so you see how that can affect, though. I'll bring it back into real estate. Crime has gone up, obviously, when you have a higher concentration of people and you have gentrification in areas that used to be pretty, poverty stricken or lower to middle class housing, and it's all being gentrified. Crime starts to creep into the more populated and nicer areas. We have things happening in Brentwood and things like that. People stop wanting to buy into those areas and start saying, see, everyone moved here, and now the crime is increasing. And that's how the stretch out starts to happen, where we have people that are looking to get away from the city now, that are looking in the more rural areas. So me as an agent, I'm trying to, since I moved here 2 years, I don't have a bunch of friends here. I don't have a sphere of influence. I've had to start my business from ground zero with nothing, as far as building a database of clients. And I could kind of see this happening, and that's why I started focusing on the outskirts, the more rural areas, to try to get ahead of that. So I don't know. Do you see that in Houston as well, Kobe?
Yeah, absolutely. So anywhere where there's like a larger population, more I guess dense population, there's just not a ton of activities. And also a lot of the agents who's been in the area for a long time, or just been in the business for a long time, have already kind of monopolized that market, right? Because the home prices are usually a little bit higher, and they have a little bit more connections as well. So you can see that within like the more central areas of Houston, like they consider like actual Houston versus the greater Houston area. So a lot of the agents who are, maybe newer to the industry, they're focused more on the, a lot of people just focus on, doing new construction deals, right? They represent buyers and, buying new construction homes. They specialize in that. They have a good understanding, have good relationships with the developers and the builders, and they're able to focus more on the kind of the outskirts of the market as well. But because they understand that in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to grow into the more populous areas, and that's where they see that too. So they're looking at like where all the big, strip malls are going up, where the Walmarts and the Costco's are going up, and they're focusing in and around those markets.
Same.
On the new construction side, like a DR Horton or Ryan Homes up in North, DC area, and they're buying down rates, like you mentioned, to the 4.99. How prevalent is that from a builder standpoint? What percentage of builders are buying down rates for their clients like that own their own lenders?
I feel like it's a good percentage. I feel like, most of the new builds have some sort of incentive that the builders are offering to get them in quicker and to be more competitive. But I think, like you guys say, the key is, with real estate in general, just understand it's cyclical and it's not a get rich quick scheme. I mean, you want to have cash flow and you want to be making money off it, but the real money is, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had some other lenders tell me when I suggested for my buyers a rate buy down. I had other lenders tell me that like a rate buy down wasn't a good idea, and that it was smarter for you to just make double payments. I don't really understand why a rate buy down would be a bad thing. Can you guys touch on that at all? Like what would be the downside of doing a rate buy down compared to?
Well, it depends. So the risk of a rate buy down in the environment that we're in, which is supposedly a declining interest rate environment, when they're going to go down and by how much, nobody really knows. But if you're paying, you just have to do the cost benefit analysis. If you're paying $5,000 to buy the interest rate down and it's saving you $150 a month, then you better make sure you're staying in the property for 150 times however many months that is to recoup that $5,000. If you're going to get out of the loan in the next 12, 18, 24 months, then, which in all likelihood you are, most people refinance in about 2 years. You just got to see how much you're paying for that rate buy down. One philosophy, which nobody really likes, which I think might be a good idea, is to buy the rate up and get some cash to help with the costs. And then you're paying an extra $150 a month to get $5,000. And then you're going to refinance anyway. But there's always a risk, and who knows what the market's going to do, right?
Can you share a little bit more about that? Buy the rate up. So So is that the same as paying points? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So anytime you have your par interest rate, you have the option to put more money towards that rate to reduce the interest rate to pay less. At the same time, let's say you needed some money to help with the closing costs, you can accept a rate that's higher than your par rate and get that money as a credit.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you can do either one with the interest rate. So if you're short on cash and you want to have, save a little bit left over and you have every intention of refinancing in the next 12 months when rates go down a little bit, why not get that extra cash that you need right now, pay a little bit more per month with the expectation of refinancing in the future?
Very cool.
Got it. Okay. We're going on an hour here. Last couple of things here. So I was talking about this earlier. Okay. I talk about increasing income on my platforms, right? Okay. Well, if I save money, what am I going to do with it? I can invest in the stock market. I can invest in real estate. I can invest in crypto, things like that. And right now, crypto is a big topic, not to go in a rabbit hole, but let's just say that you want to invest, $1 a day in Bitcoin. And I think I saw a stat that, that over 30 years, it's like $210,000. Again, it's a long time. But if you did that, put $1 a day into Bitcoin for 30 years, I think the estimated to be however many millions of dollars. I forget the number, but it was a substantial number. So question for you guys, what is the one thing that can help you go generate more income? So Chris, you're doing real estate. Kobe, you're building a team. Alex, you're in my world doing lending. What's the one thing to double down on to go generate more income and obviously provide value for your clients?
I have to give you some information as well. Like, I also work for BP. So real estate is my exit strategy for long-term generational wealth. I have a 9-to-5. I'm fortunate enough to do it remotely, and once in a while I have to travel to the project area to kind of manage, make sure things are going smoothly. But real estate is my exit goal. I mean, it's nice because I get benefits. I got a secured paycheck that comes in, make sure my bills are paid. So when the market is slow, times like now, I started the year out with 5 or 6 listings, whatever it was, and now I have one. I closed all my other deals, and now there's nothing else coming in. I don't have to sweat and scramble. But eventually, that is the goal, to have a portfolio of properties that are making me passive income, and I'm also doing retail real estate that's getting my business solidified.
Chris, do you ever travel down to Houston, like the Baytown area?
I have been to Beaumont before. That's where my company was based out of, but not yet. No, right now we're working on a project at O'Hare Airport for BP, replacing some pipelines.
Yeah, there's a lot of people working for BP down in Houston too. They're called the Energy Corridor.
Yeah, it's huge. Definitely, that's kind of the motherland for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as like doubling down on your income, I think, if you're running a business, what you would do is you would double down on your business. So a lot of people don't understand that actually the best place to kind of invest your money in the beginning is not necessarily in like outside investments. You should always diversify and, look for places to put your money. But actually the best return you're going to get is reinvesting back into your business, because you understand it and you also have control over it. So what you can do is you can invest back into your marketing. Maybe it's a new tool that you're wanting to use for your business. Maybe it's automated systems, right? So whatever you're doing, I think if you're running your own business, reinvest back into that. But if you are in, a 9-to-5 job, if you're in a paid employee position, what you should be looking for is either side hustles or different investment strategies, like passive investment strategies, if you don't have the time, that are related to your industry. So you shouldn't be looking for like the next fad or the next kind of trend going. You should be investing in something that you understand. And usually that's something that's related to your industry. So maybe you are working in, right, like oil and gas, right? For an example, then you should be looking at maybe stocks or companies that are emerging in oil and gas, because you understand that better than somebody like myself who's not in that industry. So that's kind of my take on things is, you can't necessarily take away your knowledge and what your understanding of a specific industry or companies, that, all these other investments out there, everything's good if you make the right decisions. It's just, if you're working within your industry, you're going to make more than likely you're going to make a better decision.
I have to agree with
I
that
love that.
completely. The job with BP, I do their real estate work, all their easements, permits, land leasing, all that kind of stuff. So it goes from dealing with agriculture and how to purchase land or how to figure out how to appraise land. It's just a different side of real estate. So yeah, I agree with you on that though. Yeah, you should, whatever you're passionate in, I say you should operate in your gifts, whatever purpose you've been given or whatever passion you've been given, you should operate something in that passion, so it doesn't feel like a job.
Yeah, I think Kobe hit the nail on the head right there. Now that we have, a little bit of time, business isn't where we want it to be for most people in our industry and most industries, I guess. So don't let it go to waste. Keep investing in yourself, working on your systems, trying to gain that market share. And I know it's been a while, but just, weathering the storm until it eventually comes back around, and then we'll be on top and ready to take in all that workflow.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, this is an example of me, doubling down on something. And for me, I believe that building my personal brand is so important. And again, I live in St. Louis, and I'm doing business in different markets from DC to Florida to Texas to the Midwest. So it's so important for me to be able to do these things to stay relevant. And that's where I spend a lot of my extra time. And then I also separately, getting into commercial, doing more commercial term sheets on apartment complexes and mobile home parks and various things like that. It's helping me get in front of the, more of a higher end clientele, which is, part of my goal. From a marketing standpoint, Kobe, back to you, marketing and getting in front of the right type of clientele. I mean, what is the realtor that's shopping for a brokerage? What are they looking for? What do they want? How are you and your team attracting those agents?
Yes. So we do a lot of search engine optimization. So when people are looking for different places to hang their license or looking for a change, they're usually searching for information online, whether if that's YouTube or Google, Google through articles. So we do a lot of SEO. In fact, all the agents that we've attracted for the past 4 years are basically 100% from search engine optimization. So what they're looking for is information that they can then find online first. And then they're already in a position where they're motivated to get more information either directly about our company or just about different companies in general. And then they're seeking us out instead of the other way around. So it's a different type of conversation. Whereas if you're seeking agents out, which is something I've began to do just in a different market share, if you will, recently, it's a lot of volume. It's a lot of kind of flipping for aces. Versus search engine optimization, people are coming to you and they're actually looking for information. So if you understand the algorithms correctly, you can target specific phrases and keywords so that your content shows up whenever somebody types that into their different search engines.
Badass. Love it. All right. Anything else somebody wants to share real quick before we wrap up?
This was great, Joel. I appreciate you having me on. You inspired me to step up my business and this side of things. It's great.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me again, Joel. Nice meeting you, Kobe.
You too.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, appreciate you, Joel, for asking me on, and thank you for supporting the content.
Damn right, love it. Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like you post stuff, you post, and you just never know where it's gonna go, who's gonna see it. And like I have a client right now that we're writing up an offer on. And I've been talking to them for several years, and they saw posts and they referred and whatever. You just never know how it's going to come back around. So don't stop. That's the thing. If you don't see the results, it's okay. Just don't stop.
Consistency is key. I agree.
Boom. All right. Until next time. Thanks y'all for jumping on, and we'll talk soon.
Go Bears.